Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole and in today's video I want to talk more about the solar eclipse on this past Monday, August 21st, and kind of compare it to some observations I found in this old text. I'm going to just read to you part of it here, and I will post the text in the description so you could read a little bit more. It has kind of a lot from many other different perspectives, and the text is called The Total Solar Eclipse of 1905, Reports of Observations Made by Members of the British Astronomical Association of the Total Solar Eclipse of 1905, August 30th. And I'm just going to read here the parts that I found really interesting and how they really were comparable to what I experienced on Monday. And I definitely don't have good pictures of what happened with the solar eclipse. That's why I did not post them in my last video, but I'll include them here and I'll try to show what I saw. Okay, so this is under miscellaneous notes. It says here, the body of the moon presented the appearance of a disk of a dull gray-black color. Before totality, Mr. C.L. Brooks suspected a portion of its periphery beyond the sun's limb. After totality, he felt certain he could see a small portion equal to about 3 minutes of our outside both cusps. It was seen by Mr. and Mrs. Johnson immediately after the first contact for perhaps half its full circumference. The same two observers noticed that the wind entirely dropped during totality, springing up immediately afterwards from the same quarter as that from which it had previously blown. Besides the effects on animals already mentioned, not many seem to have been noticed during totality, the chief being the braying of donkeys and the scampering about of a cavalry horse, and the going to roost of a canary. Mr. Eaton, a naturalist who joined Mr. Crossneild's party on the steamer, sends interesting account of his observations of the behavior of bees, wasps, ants during the eclipse. He says that the bees remained in activity until about 15 minutes before totality, and that the ants all ceased work and went to sleep immediately. It grew dark, waking up and resuming operations shortly after the light returned. So it's really interesting that they said that the wind had stopped during the totality of the eclipse and then resumed right after from the same direction that it was before, and I literally noticed the same thing. I was so aware of the breeze and the wind before even the eclipse began because it was so hot out, like over 90 degrees. And during the eclipse, when it was, most totality, although the location I was at in Northern Virginia, we didn't experience the full night darkness. We did have a slight bit of the top of the sun still visible, but during the totality, or almost totality, the wind literally got so still, everything became so eerie, and the light was just so bizarre, and the shadows and just the tint of the colors were all looking really strange. And I'm going to read in another thing over here, some other interesting things that I did not witness, but people in the past have seen during a solar eclipse, such as what they're calling it as a shadowband. And these were well observed horizontally by several groups of observers on sheets stretched out on the ground. And they're saying here that the bands began to be visible very faintly on account of the amount of general sunlight a little bit before totality, and quickly reached their maximum strength as the general light declined. They never became strong at any time. The direction and pace were uniform till within 10 seconds of totality, when they moved more slowly, became broader, and lay wider apart than before. They ceased to be visible 5 seconds before totality, but whether this was because the light was no longer sufficient to see them by, or because they had really ceased, it was not possible to determine. As for the commencement, so their cessation, no precise moment could be fixed. So they show here a drawing or an illustration of what they were appearing to be with the description. I'll try to read as many descriptions in here as I can because, I wasn't seeing many of these photographs. Like, there were a lot of photographs of the shadows of all the little crescent moons, and I'll try to post some here that I found on just other people's videos. Other people got really good shots of these shadows, and it's really interesting how that's also mentioned in here. I'll try to find where they describe that. And so the shadow bands, when you're observing them, they were parallel, uniform in appearance, and not in groups, but they seemed to wave or flicker in the direction of their length, and at no time presented a definite continuous edge. One observer describes them as made up of connected blotches, another compares them to split waving rods, and yet another to the shadow of drifting rain. Perhaps they may best be likened to the reflections of ripples from a sunlit water surface onto an adjoining vertical surface, or to the shadow of the airwaves produced by a column of air passing over a heated surface thrown upon a screen by a bright light. So that's just one description here, and I'm going to post you the illustration they have. And so it says here that these shadows disappeared during the totality of the eclipse. So what's interesting about this and what it made me think about is how this could be a reflection through the water, and how the sun itself may be a reflection on the water above us, and that it's not actually physical, it's just a reflection of whatever that light is coming from. And when the totality of the eclipse, when the moon or the black disk or Rahu, whatever you think, passed in front of the sun to create the total eclipse, when that occurred, then these waves were not visible anymore. The shadow bands weren't visible, and that could be because the light is no longer reflecting through that water and showing the waves of the shadow bands. If you know anyone who had seen these shadow bands, let me know, because this is the first I was hearing of it when I saw in this book here. So yeah, I want to talk more about how our ancient ancestors viewed the solar eclipses, and I found this excerpt in a book called Astronomy, the Science of the Heavenly Bodies, and I will post it in the description and tell you what chapter this is in. Keep in mind that they think that our ancestors in the ancient civilizations that came before us were not intelligent. They believed that they had no idea where they lived. They thought that because they thought the earth was flat, that maybe they were stupid, but no, they were probably smarter than us. Primitive peoples indulged in every variety of explanation of mysterious happenings in the sky. To the Chinese and all through India, a total eclipse of the sun is caused by a certain dragon with very black claws, who, except for their frightening him away by every conceivable sort of hideous noise, would most certainly eat up the sun. The eclipse always goes off. The sun has never been eaten yet. Can you convince a Chinaman that Rahu, the dragon, wouldn't have eaten up the sun if this unearthly din hadn't frightened him away? In Japan, the eclipse drops poison from the sky into wells, so the Japanese cover them up. Fontenelle relates that in the middle of the 17th century, a multitude of people shut themselves up in cellars in Paris during a total eclipse. That's interesting. In the Shu King, an ancient Chinese work, occurs the earliest record of a total eclipse of the sun. In the year BC 2158, the Nineveh, however you say that, of BC 763 is perhaps the first of the ancient eclipses of which we possess a real clear description of the Assyrian eponym tablets in the British Museum. And I'm going to probably skim through some of this. It is the first eclipse to have been predicted probably by means of the Saros, or 18-year period of eclipses, which is useful as an approximate method even at present day. But the accident of war between the Lydians and the Medes has added greatly to the historic interest, because the combatants were so terrified by the sudden turning of day into night that they at once concluded a peace cemented by 2 marriages. Very many of the ancient eclipses have been great use to the historian in verifying dates, and mathematical astronomers have employed them in correcting the lunar tables or intricate mathematical data by which the motion of the moon is predicted. I thought it was relevant to bring up both those texts and talk about the shadow bands and how people in the past viewed the solar eclipse. I thought it was really weird how they said that a lot of people used to cover up their wells because they felt that they would be poisoned in their water, and how others used to go into their cellars and hide from the eclipse. And I feel like it's interesting to note that a lot of, or all of the animals get silent and feel the need to go to sleep, or at least pretend they're sleeping during the eclipse, because they're probably unaware, or maybe they are aware of what's really happening on a more spiritual, vibrational level. I'm not sure, but it's really crazy to note how the wind stops, the animals stop, and how people in the past seem to fear the eclipse. This past Eclipse Monday, the hype is all about how you should look at it, you should be in it, you should see it, you have to look up at the sky during the eclipse, and it seems really opposite as to what was happening back in the day, where we seem to be scared of it and we seem to think there is some sort of negative feeling or something strange and off about the eclipse. And we did have that feeling. The people I was around at this golf tournament, when we were outside the whole day, there was a strange feeling in the air, and maybe we should have been hiding. Maybe we shouldn't have been outside and trying to witness this, and maybe we were partaking in something that, you know, the powers that should not be wanted us to take part in for their own benefit. I'm not sure, but I think that these texts show something really interesting, and there's a lot more in here, so definitely dig through it and try to read through it all. I hope you like this video, and subscribe if you have not done so already. Love you. Bye.